Hello and welcome to WKNC's official sports podcast, In the Den. Today we'll be going over some of the top NFL draft prospects that NC State has. We'll be going over Corrigan's press conference and what that could mean for NC State's future. And we'll be celebrating the soon-to-be 21st anniversary of NC State's mini March Madness run in 2005. So get your headphones on and get seated. Let's get straight to it. While I say let's get into it, let's get into NC State's women's soccer, who last night, as of the time recording, played James Madison University. Despite having more opportunities to score, where it was 6 shot on goal for NC State compared to 5 by James Madison, and about 10% more of the shots were shots on goals for NC State, in which it even includes corner shots, really, when I'm talking about opportunities, because NC State had 5 corner shots compared to James Madison's 3. They were blown out 3-0. NC State was. Goalie Olivia Pratapaz only saved 2 shots, and both of those were within the first 10 minutes of play, while James Madison saved 6 total shots. And some of the scoring, there was one within that first 10 minutes. So, after that first goal, Pratapaz did not save a single other shot, which include a tragic own goal within 26 minutes. And then late in the game as well, just within 75 minutes just to secure the game. Substitute Tiara Garnis attempted the most shots, while starter Jade Bordelot leads the team with 2 shots on goal. However, she does have 3 fouls, which makes up roughly a little more than half of the team's total fouls. Defenders Mana Nataka and Mackenzie Smith both earned blocks, and Smith even had 2 shots as a defensive player, which is pretty impressive, especially since defenders don't really score as much. But ultimately, this was a really tough loss that felt really preventable. There were plenty of opportunities to score, as I mentioned before, but, that's the thing with soccer. I feel like a lot of it is luck, too. Of course, there's skill in getting it into the right area to score, but sometimes the kicks just don't go in right, and that was what was happening today. The offense just kind of stagnated for a lot of the game. While James Madison is a moderately successful program, this loss really shouldn't have happened. And overall, it's a debut that leaves a lot to be desired from Coach Gary Higgins, especially from defensive captains Olivia Pratapaz and Brooklyn Holt, and including some of the newcomers. Mackenzie Smith, I think, played well. Some of the freshmen, like Daisy Duda, didn't really do too much. It's just ultimately there's a lot that needs to be done before we head into conference schedule to sort of roughen up around the edges. Offensively, I hope to see more shots go in for Bordelot and Garnis, but the spot for kind of being the offensive weapon of the team is wide open, especially since we haven't really seen any exhibition or scrimmage games, so we don't really know what we're getting out of this team. But we're hoping to, this Sunday, they'll play against ECU at Greenville. It's Gary Higgins' old team. Last time they played, which was last season, NC State lost 0-1, but they are 4 wins, 3 losses, and 2 ties against them all time, with the last one being in 2019. ECU played last night as well. They were blown out against Liberty 3-1, with 2 of those goals coming against them in the first half hour, one of them actually within the first minute. And their only goal being made within the last 10 minutes of the game off of a penalty for Isabella Gutierrez. Both teams are dealing with growing pains and adjustments. This is for ECU's first season without Gary Higgins. Not in their program history, but just in general, I feel like losing a really good coach as a small program can really hurt and can really create an adjustment period, especially if the guy up next isn't particularly great either. Not shaming the ECU head coach. I don't know enough about him, but that's kind of what we see with history. Trying to think of a example off the top of my head. I'm sure one will come to me eventually. I guess just kind of a stretch example. Just look at the success of Oklahoma before Lincoln Riley left and then after. If that makes sense. ECU's USC's bigger than Oklahoma, so I think that tracks. I'm getting off topic here, but yeah, both teams are adjusting. NC State, they're trying to return to dominance after a really abysmal season and being ranked in early polls as being the second worst in the conference, behind I think it was either Boston College or Syracuse, which is not great. Being the second worst. But I think this game will be important to see what bright spots there are for each team heading into conference schedules. Hope that we'll be able to find those that star power that we need offensively. And they just have to stay aggressive. They have to create those opportunities and take them as much as they can. That 46% shot on goal rate, I think, is good enough as long as they take more opportunities to take shots. They have to be more aggressive offensively and capitalize off of the mistakes that we saw ECU have against Liberty in last night's game. And since ECU hasn't really shown much life in just one game, granted, this season, we're hoping that the defense just has to stay consistent. We just kind of have to see a little bit more from Prachapas. We have to see a little bit more from Holt. If Nataka and Smith can, produce blocks like they did in the last night's game, they could win, and I think they will win. I won't be there for that one. I wasn't there for yesterday's either, but I think I'm going to try to be there for the conference schedule home opener, which would be a little later next month, like mid next month. I don't know what that game is off the top of my head, but I do plan on being there for that. I think that just about wraps up the early part, the women's soccer preview. Now we're going over some of the top NFL drafts prospects that NC State has on their roster. This is my first real attempt at trying to scout players, so I'm going to try my best to portray kind of what I see and what the consensus is with these players I'm about to list. But I have 3 athletes who are currently playing with NC State who could have a shot getting drafted this year, or I guess one of them would be next year. So, all right. So we're going to start with probably the most obvious player who could get drafted on this roster. With Casey Concepcion leaving, there is a lot of opportunities for some of the more athletic players with high potential to show up, and one of them is tight end Justin Jolly. He's listed as 6'3", 235 pounds, which is a little bit smaller than the average NFL tight end. He averaged 15.4 yards per reception last year for a total of 661 yards and 4 touchdowns. A lot of draft boards kind of have him ranked between like the 5th and 14th best tight ends, so we really don't know what we're getting out of him. Blocking wise, some notable things to mention. Only one hold-in penalty within the last season, and he blocks well against slightly bigger athletes. I remember looking at the UNC footage, and he was able to block well against some of the bigger linebackers that they have on that roster. And with his reception performances, he is trusted a little bit in the deeper and mid-level routes where he can get some separation. He can be seen left open in shallow routes. I think that could just be the way that the offense is schemed, where a lot of the throws are kind of more further down. I don't think NC State threw a lot of short routes last season, but he can get shaken a bit when getting blocked on his route running, but he can get big bursts as well, catching the ball or early in his route running, especially when he gets the ball. Because if he can get the ball, he can get a lot of yards after catch yards. Thinking Stanford. It's this one catch, I think, in the second period where there's sort of like 4 defenders within a couple yards around him, but he was able to catch it about 10 yards deep, and he got good 5 extra yards off of that. His success in the NFL. I guess let's go into some of his other big performances. ECU, that was another big one where he scored a touchdown, being double covered, maintained enough separation to gain 38 yards in that drive. So, I mean, maybe it's not too much. It wasn't really a crazy passing game for NC State. They definitely relied on Hollywood Smothers and C.J. Bailey's legs in that game, but there was a bright spot in the passing game at that point where they were able to get big passing yards on Justin Jolly. I don't know why I spaced out there. I don't know, brain fart. But in the NFL, he would probably succeed as a special teams or backup tight end for a run-heavy offense. Think Philadelphia, Green Bay. I mean, those are teams that could draft tight ends, and if they don't get one early on, Justin Jolly is a great consolation prize. His biggest question is route running, creating consistent separation. While you can't get it, there's a lot of times where he can be covered, and the defenses can just make plays on him. Like UNC, he didn't have a great game in the air, where there was a couple of blocked passes on him, and then I think there was one interception that was given up when it was targeted to him. I may be thinking of another receiver. But defensively, the cornerbacks and safety were able to take care of business against him, even when they're not really, hate to be blunt, but NFL caliber corners, safeties. He needs to justify having a bigger role as a receiving tight end due to his smaller size. While he can block pretty well against people bigger than him, that's college. I don't know how it's going to work out for him in the NFL at that level. And I think he can produce and he can handle himself well, but that's kind of what's holding him for being a dominant tight end is that size, and just he's doing a lot, but is it enough, essentially? A strong reception season at NC State would probably get rid of all doubts, and he could definitely find himself rising up draft boards as long as he has a good season. I think he will be either the number 2 or number 1 target for this team, and I think that'll give him plenty of opportunities to prove himself, both with his route running, his ability to create reception, to show off some of his talents with creating yards after the catch and blocking well for the running game and Hollywood Smothers. And I think that just about does it. So that is our first prospect, Justin Jolly. This next one is the other receiving prospect who might not go into the draft this year, but I could definitely see 27, him and C.J. Bailey. Ladies and gentlemen, wide receiver Noah Rogers. Noah Rogers transferred from Ohio State in 2024. He's another receiver who could see a big productive jump in 25-26. He's bigger than the average NFL wide receiver, listed at 6'2" and 205 pounds. About 13.7 yards per reception for 478 yards and a touchdown. Just not great, but not terrible either, considering how small his role was. And he got about one or two catches every game. So he's not a terrible athlete. There just hasn't been much of an opportunity for him to play. But with Casey Concepcion being gone, maybe there's a spot for him. Let's see. Pure athlete, playmaker offense. Think of like in Syracuse where he was able to get some really good plays where there was like a large 75-yard reception that had 50 yards after the catch, where he was going down the sideline and creating. I don't think he scored a touch. That was his touchdown, I believe, in that game. And then there was that diving reception that was pretty shallow and catching off a deflected pass in that Syracuse game. That was really the game where you could kind of see the potential in him as a not even a draft prospect necessarily, but a receiving star for this team because he can get things done. He had some. He's a good speedy route runner. Think of Wake Forest. He was able to just get his. I mean, there were sort of like smaller, medium routes, but he was able to complete them really quickly, and he was able to get the ball. He was able to extend himself, and he was able to get a couple first downs in that Wake Forest game, for instance. He's a pure athlete. I think he played track as well. Playmaker on offense. I mean, he can create yards off the catch just like Jolly can. And he's really good at stretching himself and showing off his athleticism for receptions. However, he doesn't have much for him in block packages. They don't really use him in the run game too much. So there's a small sample size there. I mean, to be fair, I don't think that your wide receivers are a priority in the run game. That I don't think that whoever the top receiving prospects coming into 2026, like Jacoby Lane or Nick Harbor, I don't think they're going to have to worry necessarily about their ability to block the cornerback when it's like that far away from the line of scrimmage, like hashes and beyond. But I think it's not a nuisance to be a good blocker. It would definitely help him. And because of his small sample size and the lack of like real production he had in offense, he just is not a game changer. He hasn't really shown that extra pizzazz, extra thing that proves that he can be a star. I mean, he didn't really get much in Ohio State, and he doesn't really get much now. And well, I think that he will be able to into this year. We need to see something if we want to truly believe that he can be a draft prospect. I think it's something where his upside is so high. I think he was a 5-star too. That it's hard to ignore what it can become. And now the last prospect, a defensive guy. I'm sure you probably recognize him with the long hair. Sean Brown, who started at safety but then moved down to linebacker. He's the leading tackler on the team with 96 in 12 games. He's 6 foot, 215 pounds, which is a bit small for a linebacker, but good size for a safety. He was fifth in the country with 3 recovered fumbles. Some of his notable performances I mentioned was Clemson, where he was able to get a sack. I mean, it was the backup quarterback, and it was late in the game with a big blowout, but he was able to burst through I think it was the A block, and was able to loop back around to get the sack in that one. He forced his way through another wide open gap in the NIU game where he was able to get a sack and strip the ball from the fullback in the end zone, separate plays. That was another notable sack that he got. He can really just burst through the what was I gonna say? He's really good at just bursting through the defensive line, especially on blitz plays. Think about Wake Forest. In that game, his sack, where he was able to strip the ball from the quarterback during the sack and was basically able to just kind of rip it out of his hands and take over for himself, which is very. I mean, that's a good thing to do as a defensive player, to be able to just take the ball from the hands while trying to sack him and just rip it out and come back standing, essentially. And he had one more strip sack against Stanford as well. So he was able to get a couple strip sacks, a couple of fumbles where he was able to recover them. And overall, as I mentioned, I mean, he is just a fast, aggressive athlete who can burst through the line. And, there were some questions going into that last season of how he can perform as a linebacker, but he has basically kind of removed all doubt that he is that number one guy who can explode from the lower layers of the defense, especially on the blitz. His footage and coverage plays leaves a lot to be desired, which is what part of why he was moved down to linebacker, was just because he was not as good in the pass coverage as he is in the run coverage. And while he won't be able to make a big splash as either a complementary linebacker or taking over in that hybrid role, that we'll probably have to wait and see until that first game to see who can take that spot. If he can improve on his play stopping prowess, he will get drafted, even if it's a later round pick and he ends up being a special teams guy. He's committed to the game, and he is someone I think a lot of scouts kind of have their eyes on, as is with Rogers and Jolly, which is kind of my way of wrapping up this little segment. Coming up next, we'll go over Boo Corrigan's press conference, which is just kind of explaining some of the things that he mentioned in the interview and just my personal opinions on them. And then we'll finish with that 2005 March Madness run. Not too long ago, Boo Corrigan, the athletic director for NC State University, had a press conference with the school and some of the journalists in the North Carolina Raleigh area. He talked a lot about the future of NIL, NC State's competitiveness, and kind of how the revenue for NC State's going to be coming in for the future. With the $20.5 million settlement in the Hill versus NCAA case, there's that $20.5 million that is sort of compensation money for all older athletes, as well as money for athletic programs. A lot of additional funding can be coming through that way, as well as with venuing for Carter Finley and naming rights for it. Let's see. So $2 million for the new athletes, and $2.5 for the facilities. The plan is kind of just give them a sort of basis amount of funding to work with, and each coach can kind of take how much money they truly need in order to keep their facilities running or to get upgrades. And he hopes that flexibility will allow football and men's basketball to get the care they need, while also giving smaller sports a chance to take care of their athletes, like giving football and men's basketball a little higher starting funds, but then giving the smaller school a lot more flexibility in what they can do with their money. Naming rights are prioritized for donors who look to provide for NC State students and graduates, which will be a key part of the kind of wide open negotiations with it. While I don't necessarily love the idea of um, changing the name of the stadium. I think, yeah, selling the naming rights would change the name of the stadium. Yeah. Um, I don't love that. It does have the blessing of the Carter and Finley families, which is sort of a consolation prize to it. I just don't. I don't love the idea of it, but I think having that money going to the school and having the name and rights company help to provide a network for NC State graduates and students is kind of a way to make it a win-win. I think Boo Corrigan has done a great job with figuring out how to bring in funds for NC State, and I think his work with our new chancellor Kevin Howell will kind of continue that positive momentum, especially when he's made it clear that competitiveness and entertainment is the top goal and priority of NC State athletics. He has no intention of separating himself from the rest of the departments of NC State or to have it take priority. While, a lot of schools, they do kind of seem to have that problem where a lot of the money seems to go into the sports funding and not necessarily into the quality of the school or what they're teaching or just um, how they take care of themselves in an academic manner, I guess is the way to put it. Like the example provided by Corrigan was with the National Institute of Health and research funded as most likely to be tampered with. They offer support and compromise with research departments as necessary, rather than carrying the image of being above us of all the other academic departments in the school. And their responsibilities within caring for the students above all else, even if that means taking a little less of funding, even though they do have that 20.5 million and upcoming naming rights, which helps them a lot. Um, NC State, some other ways of them getting fundings, you can look at their rev share. They showed patience with future of employment status and collective bargaining for student athletes. They haven't really taken a side yet, and they're just going to kind of wait and see what comes from it. NC State is also in support of antitrust exemptions to maintain the sanctity of revenue sharing within the ACC. So, what I think that means is basically it's kind of equal within all the schools. So I think the bigger schools get just that little bit extra, and as NC State being a bigger school, that's kind of part of it. There is some talk in the future of, um, you know, conference realignment, which I think is going to come within the next few years, especially as schools like Clemson, SMU, and Florida State will probably want to see if they can get a bit more money going into a big conference. Like, could you imagine Clemson, SMU, and Florida State being in the SEC? They might even take UNC and Duke too, just to kind of take the North Carolina part of the Southeast. But it's just I don't think that that's going to be something NC State's necessarily worried about. They sound like they believe that even if dominoes start to fall in the future, as of right now, the ACC is good enough for the program, which makes sense because of the success that they've had. I don't think that they're definitely not going to go down a level. Like you could argue, the Big 12 is going down a bit. But they might not be in contention to go to the SEC if changes do happen. I don't think that's something they're necessarily worried about. And the last thing he mentioned is support of NIL Go and the subscription model where they supply NIL deals to the athletes, but he wants more from the collective efforts of NIL Go. Even though that's early in negotiations, he's hoping that that organization and other NIL agencies will do more to provide for the athletes rather than the schools having to do it. That will be something that we'll kind of have to wait and see in the future. A lot of this is still early on, and NC State is kind of taking the side of just waiting to see how everything works out. I think that's a smart approach. They don't need to be in the forerunning for anything, especially not with how, they're not the most dominant program. They're not the biggest athletic program, not even in the state, really. I think that's Duke. I'm happy with what they have going on. I'm happy with everything that is, I'm happy with the future of this athletic program. And that kind of sums up that press conference. It was pretty short. And now we'll be going into our last part with the 2005 men's basketball little March Madness run. This episode's definitely going to be a longer one, but that's not going to be too bad. In the year of 2004, got real dramatic there. Number 3 seed NC State was just one shot away from being number 6 Vanderbilt. Ilyan Efitimov, the junior forward from Winston-Salem, misses a shot to lose 75-73. He's become a staple in the starting rotation heading into this upcoming season. And they're hoping to continue this big run that they had last year. They bring back Julius Hodge, the star of the team, and the senior guard from the Bronx who led the conference in shooting accuracy and second-team All-American. Some other notable starters. Injin Atsur returns to run the point guard. Backup who could take more starts. Center Jordan Collins and Georgetown guard Tony Bethel. There's a lot to be noteworthy for the team. The team plays in a generous Princeton-style offense where, a lot of people get the opportunity to carry the rock and distribute assists and score. Julius Hodge was the big star of this team. They'd entered the season ranked 19th in the country and proved themselves worthy of that title. For the month of November and the first half of December, they were dominant, winning the majority of their games by pretty good margins. However, that is the pre-conference schedule part, and that includes the toughest opponent is Purdue. And their first loss of the season came to number 18, Washington, led by Brandon Roy and Nate Robinson. They would lose 4 straight heading into January, including a loss by 1 to Miami, Florida, that took them out of the top 25, and a blowout loss to number 2 Duke that cemented it. However, they would recover late into February and March. They'd have a win against number 8 Georgia Tech and go on to finish 7-9 in the conference. Some notable wins include number 22 Maryland, and some losses were blowouts by UNC and Wake Forest. This team did not reach their expectations of last season with their pretty inconsistent starting crew. The only starters that were really consistent was Julius Hodge, Atsur, and outside of that, there was a rotation with Tony Bethel, Levi Watkins, Cameron Brenneman, Andrew Brackman, I think I mentioned Jordan Collins, and Ilyan Efitimov. So they really haven't figured out their gel yet. However, they entered the ACC tournament as one of the lower seeds, having to play in the wild card round versus Florida State, where they really took care of business. Efitimov and Atsur scored 18 and 17, with Atsur leading in assists and Hodge addition 7 of his own to win 70-54. However, a leg injury to Tony Bethel meant that forward Cameron Brenneman was going to have to come off the bench. Wake Forest was next. Head coach Skip Prosser and star Chris Paul. Well, Chris Paul actually wasn't there in the last game that Wake Forest played against NC State, which was late in the regular season. Chris Paul punched Julius Hodge and was suspended for this game. But they still had no way to deal with Justin Gray and Eric Williams for Wake Forest. However, Brenneman Hodge took the lead in scoring at Seward, led with steals and Efetimov with 7 assists to pair with 18 points. Pretty much 5 players notched several blocks, and the team won in dominant fashion, 81-65. So the momentum's looking really good in just the conference tournament. But then there's Duke. J.J. Redick scores 35. And despite an 8-point lead from NC State in the first half, they would lose 76-69. But they make the NCAA tournament for their 4th consecutive year as a 10th seed, with 2 starters questionable to return. I'm trying to remember who that other one was. Bethel definitely was not looking like he was going to return. But they're ready, especially since their first opponent was 7th seed UNC Charlotte. It's UNC Charlotte's 5th time in the tournament under head coach Bobby Lutz, the winningest head coach in their program history. He leads a strong offensive program with 72 points per game, led by Eddie Banson. And their plan is to limit the performances of Hodge and Atseur. They did keep Atseur held back, but Hodges had 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists, reaching the 2,000 career point threshold, and blew them out 75-63. Efetimov notched 4 steals, and Brannaman with 4 blocks and 4 straight threes to help secure that win. So with that dominant performance out of the way, I guess it wasn't really technically a major upset for a major conference team with a lower stand-in to dominate a higher stand-in team from a lower conference. But this next one, UConn, that's going to be tough. 6 NBA players on that team, including Rudy Gay, Josh Boone, Charlie Villanueva, Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams notably led the team in assists, and while he was questionable going into the game, they still had to get past Rudy Gay, Josh Boone, Charlie Villanueva. And while they were coming off a close win against South Florida, Calhoun and the Huskies were ready to clean things up before they get into the Sweet 16. Or at least that was the intention. While Williams and Villanueva scored 22 and 16 respectively, Hodge would go to score 17 points and 6 assists, supplemented by strong defensive performances from Brenneman and Efetimov, the dynamic defensive duo for this team. Brenneman in particular had a 3-point shot to help extend the lead by 4 within a minute on the clock. And when Hodge tied it again, when the score was tied again, Hodge would be able to drive in the paint to score it again, to clinch the win, 65-62. The first time in the Sweet 16 since the Jim Falfano years. Almost said that wrong. This wasn't just a team, this was a brotherhood. And this wasn't just a run from Hodges. This is destiny. To face a team that's primed as ever to take that next step, and NC State could not feel more ready for it. That game would be number 6, Wisconsin. With one of the best defensive teams and strong shooting performances from Orlando Tucker and Michael Wilkinson, Wisconsin have proven to be one of the toughest teams in any given night. But if NC State can out-rebound and keep their efficiency in shooting, they might just have a shot. Wilkinson and Tucker showed up for the game, scoring 22 points and 17 points respectively. Internet Stewart gave a productive defensive game with 3 steals and 16 points. Hodges 14 with 5 assists. But they couldn't keep up with Wisconsin's shooting streak and were heavily rebounded 17-31. With a chance to tie the game, Stewart missed a 3 to give NC State chance to lead late in the second half. Despite all that they fought to achieve, they would fall short to Wisconsin 65-59 and end their magical run. Or I guess you can call it their magical upset, but live in the moment. We'll do a Where Are They Now segment. You know I love doing those. Julius Hodge was drafted 20th overall to Denver. His jersey was retired by NC State, and he's currently the head coach of Division II basketball team, Lincoln Lions. Internet Stewart played pro ball in Turkey, most notably with, I'm going to botch this, so I apologize, Turkey. Fenerbahce and Beşiktaş, ? Ilyan Efetimov is currently playing with Cholet Basket in France. You know, their season just ended, so he might have. I don't think he's retired yet. Nope. Yeah, he's still with them, and while he did jump around France professionally, still a pretty good way to live. And Cam Brenneman runs Brand Dreams, a sports marketing vocational school that helps, kind of breed the next big era of, basketball sports people like me. Wisconsin would lose to national championship UNC in the next round. Oh, well. But hey, that concludes today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the listen. This was kind of a long one. If you have anything you want to hear about, just give WKNC a holler. Our next episode should be next week. We're going to start uploading weekly. We'll be reviewing the ECU women's soccer game and doing a pregame matchup for the football game. But I think that's pretty much all we have going for it. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hope you have a good day, and go Pack.